Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am very privileged and honored to have the opportunity to be speaking with Veda Austin, our New Zealand water researcher. Um, and today we are going to be talking about waking the sacred divine within us all. So I just want to say thank you, Veda, very much for joining us today and for coming and having the conversation with us.
Such a pleasure. And it's nice to be interviewed by you this time because last time I interviewed you.
It's true. Second
Yeah,
time around, my turn.
yeah, your turn.
Well, it's a conversation too that we've kind of played with and dabbled with a couple of few times in the times that we have chatted, and that's why we're bringing it today for the audience because we both felt that it was something that was very pertinent and needed to be discussed. Um, in terms of just the different ways that we can interact and have a relation with our internal waters. But before we get totally started on that, I know that you have some very exciting news, and I would love to hear what you have going on. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share the excitement that you have going on.
Well, there's a lot going. There's a lot going on. I don't even know which one you actually mean.
Well, I know that you just released a book. Let's talk about that one.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. My book, The Secret Intelligence of Water, has been published and it's available. And it's been so exciting because it's been 8 years of my work with taking photographs of water after it's been inspired in some way and then frozen. So I am a crystallographer and I take photographs of water, or essentially of ice. And I see all these incredibly beautiful imagery in the ice that's responding to the influence or the inspiration. Like I can put my hand in the water or think about my hand prior to freezing, and then I'll see a hand in the ice that takes up half the petri dish. And I have over 10,000 photographs of water responding in this very intelligent way. And I consider myself really I think I feel most comfortable sitting in the kind of camp, I suppose, of art, where I can invite science and I can invite spirituality to come together as a kind of collective. And it's been an amazing journey, one of which has taken me on many tributaries. And it is really a kind of never ending story, really, when you're working with water. So it just keeps taking you deeper, that is for sure.
True, it is, and it's just like those things of truth that there really is no bottom. And it's
No.
like the more you learn, the more you know you don't know, just like music and spirituality.
It's true.
It's the way that
So
it
true.
is. Yeah,
Because water goes down and it also goes up. It goes so deep down into the oceans, but it also goes up, when it's evaporated. So it goes both ways.
exactly. And into the cosmos.
Exactly.
I actually have a theory that the uh the Big Bang wasn't it was what banged was the water when and let's just use this to lead into the conversation of waking the divine feminine because when the word went into the water or came into the water, I mean, what if that was, like an orgasmic experience of the water just exploding into the cosmos, because they're finding water is everywhere and they seem to think it's a byproduct. And I'm like thinking, well, what if that was the Big Bang? And it's not the byproduct, it's just all of the pieces that were distributed to begin these little pockets of creation in all these different places, including here and in us.
I think that's a really beautiful way to actually look at it, which I don't think I've ever heard of it, that kind of concept or visual, or had that visual before, but I think it's actually really beautiful. And um, and there is so much around that. It's almost like whether it's explosion or implosion. It's actually there's probably both happening simultaneously. That's one of the incredible things about water, I've found, is that there is the explosion, but then there's the implosion as well. And it sort of connects in with Victor Schauberger's work and his ideas around how water works. But the idea that we were created by this essential, incredible, divine orgasm sounds much nicer than the Big Bang.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find that in the physics papers yet.
No, not yet.
But you heard it here first, folks.
Exactly.
But yeah, and Victor Schauberger, I mean, he, the vortex and like and the implosion, it's just like the way that that trout is being actually gravity working in the opposite direction where it's pulling the trout up the waterfall.
And
And
that's the feminine, because actually that's kind of also what happens, is that there's a magnetism that is within the egg when it's fertile and ready, that is also attracting the sperm to it. And so there is this kind of magnetism that happens, and even down to the way in which, because a woman's body prepares to become fertile, is that the cervical mucus becomes stretchy, and everything that's ever created, in creation within humans at least, is created through fluids. And really within this whole world, everything is actually conceived through fluids. And even if it's in a jelly, like frogs have this kind of like jelly, like eggs, and so everything's either within an amniotic sac or even within sperm. It's like it's a fluid. And so there is this incredible joining of fluids, and they're a very unique type of fluid in that the human body is not just H2O, but we convert H2O into H3O2, which is a different type of substance, in that it is more stretchy, it absorbs more light, it has a different viscosity, it has a slightly higher pH, it has a negative charge, got all these special qualities to it. So I actually think, this is a topic a lot of people don't like to discuss openly, but this is how we create. It's part of the divine creation. So I don't think that it needs to have a taboo around it, as long as we speak respectfully and in honor with this, because it's part of how we create.
right, and and that goes with the divine feminine and the rap that the divine feminine has, like about the shame and the hush hush and keep it quiet and let's not talk about that, and like this even with menstruation and like so many pieces of the feminine spirit and being are taboo and are not accepted as like an acceptable conversation, and that imprinting and that program that's been running since literally, I mean, if you go from a biblical perspective, from the very beginning, because that was the first thing the devil did, was throw Eve under the bus. Like she was the first like person, like that was like made wrong, and given that shame and that lower place. And in my personal opinion, that's the imbalance that's happening right now, and that's why these conversations I feel are so important, because we need to talk about what hasn't been talked about, because that was what put everything out of balance, is this patriarchal over masculine. And when I say like the divine feminine, please understand everyone that I'm not speaking just of the female spirit, although a lot of this will pertain to just the female workings. But what the other piece of that is the male aspect and their divine feminine and what they're willing to bring in, and still the programming, of it's not okay to cry or toughen up or be a big boy, or all of these indoctrinations that we have on both sides of this imbalance of not receiving our divine feminine from the very beginning, from the inception of humanity, when Eve was made wrong and shamed, and that's just a dialogue, or that's a conversation that we really need to reevaluate and look at again and see why,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and what can be changed here if we did engage in that conversation.
Of which we are. And I think many women are really owning their own sexuality and their own embodiment of what it is to be feminine. And it's okay to enjoy being a sexual being, because the truth is that, you know, we are all individuals having our own experience, but we also love to express ourselves in all different kinds of ways. We're multi-dimensional, multifaceted beings. And I think that, you know, if we can really start to, like, even if just getting connection with the fluid body that we are, with the water body that we are, that can even slowly help to change that little perspective. Because when you think of yourself as just being in this physical body, it kind of can just keep you within the physical. But water, I mean, there's a man called Edgar Cayce that talks about water essentially being an ethereal, and that the blood part of us is more of the material. And so it's a very interesting to kind of like that we're both ethereal and material. And so when you bring yourself into the awareness that we are this incredibly beautiful fluid beings, men and women, not just women, then I really think it can take you into another realm. I had this dream once, which I don't regularly share, but it seems like a nice way to bring us into into the topic I think where you're wanting to kind of potentially head. And it was this reoccurring dream I had. It was such a sensual dream. So brace yourself for like, it happened 3 nights in a row, and I was asleep dreaming, and I kind of, in my dream, I got woken up, and there was this man standing at the end of my bed, except that he wasn't really in a physical form. He was like in the shape of a man, only he was water. And I could feel this masculine energy so strongly, but at the same time he was in balance. So it was masculine, perfectly balanced with the feminine somehow. And like he just I was lying there and I couldn't move, but it wasn't because I was scared. I was just, I don't know why I couldn't move. And he kind of lay himself, hovered above me, and he said, relax, just relax. He said, this is going to be the most amazing experience. And I'm like, okay, I try. Okay, this is sounding good. And
don't they all say that? No, I'm just kidding.
No,
Totally
I don't think they do. But anyway, he's lying over the top of me, and it's so amazing because I'm magnetized by his eyes. His breath is like mist, so I can see his breath coming over me, and then I can feel the manhood part of him turns like ice, and the other whole rest of his body is like water, and the water part, everything starts to merge down into my body, the breath, the fluid water, and the ice, and everything starts to move like a wave within my body, and my body becomes one with his. And we have this experience which is totally in unity, moved with water. And it was one of the most sensual experiences that I've experienced, even though it was in dream. And it was hard to explain, but it was so sensual. And then I would wake up, and all of my body would felt like it was tingling. It felt like I could explain the exact feeling, but it was almost like, you know, that feeling when you get goosebumps. It was like that, except cold and moving. And it happened 3 nights in a row, and it really reminded me of the sensuality that we have within us, of this moving fluid, and how we can actually work with that and use that without just seeing everything as being this kind of end game physicality where we're all looking for this kind of one outcome and then that's over. But in actual fact, use this moving water fluid body that we are and open to other people. It's like we're bodies of water having experiences with other bodies of water, and our intimacy, our sovereignty as within this body, I think, is something of which is extremely beautiful, sensual, and also I really believe that even just down to kissing. You're sharing part of your information. So kissing is such an intimate thing. I remember a friend who studied sound healing once told me that the as the cells are starting to divide, when an embryo is starting to develop, outside of the heart, the next thing that comes is like the tongue. And they were saying that the heart and the tongue are intimately connected. And actually, he was saying that that's why there is such a connection between kissing, and that it's just such an intimate thing where you're sharing information. And we don't think about those things necessarily in the moment because it feels nice, but often meeting somebody and expressing yourself, not just, it doesn't even have to be with someone. We can experience sensuality within our own body without needing someone to make us feel good. But sharing a part of ourselves is a very intimate thing to do. And it requires a certain amount of vulnerability and transparency, of which I think water can represent. So it's one thing I don't want to forget to say, because I am on a little bit of limited time, is that I did a lot of study in water when I've been studying water for 8 years, and one of the things I read was that upon orgasm, something very unusual and interesting happens with certain fluids within a certain part of the cortex. So as we understand, the fluids are always moving and vortexing through the body, and the heart is vortexing the water throughout our entire body and being. So everything is always in movement. Mm-hmm. But apparently upon orgasm, there is this one area where the water stops its regular flow and actually kind of lifts itself and hovers, like in the Matrix, everything kind of slows down. So there's this hovering, and it's in the moment where you're really kind of not observing yourself anymore. So you're actually in the space where you're kind of out of your mind, literally, and you are just, the water in your brain is doing something very unusual. And when that orgasm only passes, and then everything starts to flow again back to normal. And it's this, apparently there's some scientists that study female orgasm, because they say that and they mainly women, because unfortunately they said that it's harder to study men because it doesn't quite last quite as long, which is a shame for them. But they did mainly women.
Yeah, and that goes in line with the whole thing that we were talking about with the magnetism that Schauberger brought forth, in that lifting energy of what fluid can be, how that gravity can work in the opposite direction, just like in an orgasm where you can't think about anything, you can't sneeze, like nothing else works in that moment, and it is an etheric experience. So that totally, I mean, just the visualization of that really for me correlates with what my experience has been. And I think that's a pretty incredible dream. I think I would be going to bed early on a regular basis.
I was hoping it would be a bit more regular than it was, but I'll take those 3 days. Yep.
Yeah, it's like, and I've some of the experiences and what has reawoken for me, because this is it's a mental awareness, but it's becoming something that's more of a living practice for me, and observation, and just asking a lot of questions, and looking at things from a different perspective of just like, what is that, or what's possible. And one of the experiences that I had started recently experiencing was having energetic orgasms when I'm sitting with the water, or when I'm hugging a tree, or when I'm just by myself. Like, as you said, I mean, this energy and this fluid that moves through us, this life that moves through us, and this consciousness is very engaging. And it's our level of engagement that she will always meet us at. So when we are asking those questions, and being in an open space of just not a routine, or not, and just being open to what's possible in our own experience of something new.
Mm.
And I think that's just like a really special place and a very important place to start, because yes, you know, we can have these experiences with our partners, but how can, you know, how can we nurture this relationship within ourselves and start working with our internal waters in this way, where we're understanding what's happening, we're understanding how we can navigate this kind of energy, where it's like as we begin to feel that climax, like to be able to loop it through our system and build that energy and continue to build that energy, like through the microcosmic orbit, where you're touching the tongue, your to the roof of your mouth, again going back to the tongue, and that, you know, that sensitivity that connects us into that flow and that divine energy. And so having a practice of just being aware of how our fluids are flowing in that process. And then like for me it's, oh, like I like to set an intention, because if that energy can create life, then what else can I create? And
Mhm.
what else is possible, you know? And if I'm building this energy and it's just life energy and it's not going to actually producing a little human, then why can't I put that out into all of the other water in the cosmos and create out here, um, you know, in my perspective, like the reason why I like, let's share this, because everybody can have a really good time changing the paradigm. That's like,
Absolutely.
let's have fun while we're like shifting everything and all of the water molecules, not only within us, but everywhere on the in the planet and beyond.
Mm. Well, I think too that it is about the creative energy. So when I think about, you know, what makes me inspired, for me, it's about stepping into um, what I can do and into my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So that purpose for me personally is very creative. I'm a very creative person, so I use what I call inspired thought. So it's not the one that's on kind of a loop, that kind of one where we just go back to those same old thoughts, but it's like, you know, that thing where suddenly you think of something, it's like, oh, that's a good idea. And so I always think of that kind of as inspired thought, and take that inspired thought. And then, because the work I see all the time, with the ice and the water that I photograph, it's like showing me that thoughts become things, and it's like my thoughts are being crystallized in ice, and there have been many sensual things show up in the ice, because for me to turn off being a sexual being is me turning off part of who I am. And so sexual doesn't have to mean that we're constantly thinking about having sex, but it's about owning who you are as a sensual, sexual, beautiful person and being. Like for me, you know, you can use that sexual energy, even if you're not with a partner, to, as it's a creative force, it's a creative energy. So just like you were saying, it doesn't have to create a physical baby, but you can use that energy to create, full stop. It's the creative force, and water is a creative force. It shows it to me all the time in my work. It is like the kind of designer and architect of life, and it fills us. So it's part of like how we have shape and form, just like in plums and prunes, although it's not a particularly great idea, but I mean, I suppose it's a good enough analogy. Is like a plum is full, but once it loses water, it changes its shape and form, and it looks different. So water is, you know, the more water that's in it, the more plump and full the shape is, and the less, the different, the more it looks different. So it's creating and designing in these ways by how it's filling the thing, whether it's a body or whether it's, you know, it doesn't have to be a person, any living thing. And so when you bring that into, well, how wonderful it is, like when you think of other sexual beings, one of them is dolphins. Dolphins are so sexual, and it's funny that as human beings, we tend to identify intelligence in various different ways. One is that we can identify ourselves, like another being could identify itself in a mirror, which seems so arrogant to put intelligence and just go, right, that animal's intelligent because it can recognize itself. It's not to, it's kind of crazy to me that we do that, but we do. But another thing we do is how sexual, if you can have sex for pleasure, and dolphins are sexual for pleasure, so we add that into the list of what we call intelligent. So it is a very interesting thing. Whereas that owning of sensuality and sexuality, I think, is actually stepping up into owning all of the different facets that we are. But I think it's actually, for me personally, it's more about embodying being a sensual person in this body. So for me, sexuality and sensuality go hand in hand. They are kind of interwoven. And sexuality is a way, I think, of actually achieving a very spiritual, divine experience, because we are spiritual beings having a physical experience for a reason. So it's like owning the physical as well as the sensual and the spiritual, because ultimately I think pleasure is a good thing. It's like, as long as we're told, it's this old kind of way of being taught that kind of filters through, especially as women, because men, not all men certainly, but there is a different stigma around how many people you've been with, and all these kinds of things. And whereas women, certainly years and years ago, that was just not done. You couldn't own that you enjoyed sex. In fact, it was almost like, there was this kind of thing where it was a very quiet hush hush thing. It was like, actually, it was really good. Or it was like, you just didn't even say that. I never heard my mother talk about sex ever.
Yeah, and I think, that goes back to the programming that we've all been given, where it's the divine, the feminine has really had that spirit just squelched from the very beginning. And to the point of, like, moving that energy and making, creating a spiritual experiment or experience and personal development and using this energy, being able to actually harness that energy and bring it within, and instead of letting it go, to actually pull that energy and focus that energy into, say, our brain or our heart or an organ that's having trouble or any place in our body, to actually use this like as a medicine and as a form of self-care, not only self-pleasure but also self-care, where we're learning how to navigate, how to move and work with that flow of energy and fluid that's moving through us, and direct it into the places that are much needed. And you were talking about, like, the wisdom that comes with that, and elevating, and that was part of the description because in my question asking, I'm learning about, like, these ancient wisdoms of, like, the Egyptians and stuff, and like how, there's some theories how Mary Magdalene, that conception happened because of this type of work of being able, like, maybe she had a dream where a water being came and impregnated her, and everything is possible. And it's just like, when we start staying in the question, realizing, okay, they've been using this for a really long time, for eons. And it was usually the higher, class, the pharaohs, and they had access to this information, and the Immaculate Conception, and like there's even to the point where the resurrection, like, I've read stuff where it's leaning toward, like, their practice was a building up even before his death, like that facilitated him to be able to be resurrected. So this balance again of the divine and the masculine coming together to bring a wholeness to our being that we've never even tapped into before. Well, I mean, they have, but we in this time
Mm.
frame, it's time for that technology to be opened up and talked about and accessed again, so that we can implement it in our evolution as a species and a personal being, in that personal work of feeding our heart or feeding our mind or something that might be ailing, and stepping into that, our wholeness of that.
Yeah, well, the symbolism of the Ankh, the Egyptian Ankh, that round circle with the thing, is also representative of the breath and the sexual breathing, and especially for men that are trying to hold their seed. And it's like about bringing, before actually letting the seed release, they actually breathe it in and they breathe it up through and around through those part that in the shape of the Ankh. And it actually helps to breathe that through so they can orgasm without actually releasing the seed. And so it's been used in ancient India and ancient Egypt. These sexual practices, the whole Kama Sutra is not just about being in a million different positions. It's actually much more about the breathing, the connection, about finding a gateway to the divine. And the divine is that masculine, feminine. When I think, because I've studied Vedic philosophy, I've been to India many times, my name was natural. My mother just didn't even know what Veda meant when she named me, but even my middle name is Indian. My middle name is Karan, which is Arjuna's brother's name. And so what I always loved when you think about the divine couple, which is Radha and Krishna. So Radharani is the personification of Lord Krishna's soul. And so a body, this is in its physicality, can't be without a soul. And so there is this divine, beautiful mixture of feminine and masculine. And I remember when my daughter was very, very young, she was about 4, and I said, we were having a talk about God, and I said, what do you think God looks like? Because I always we have these really big conversations, and it was so, and I'll never forget what she said. Well, she said, I remember her, right? And she didn't say him or her. She said, I remember God. I was like, oh, okay. And she said, well, God has 2 faces. She said, I see God, there's a man face, and on the other side is a female face. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. She said, yes, it's not just one. And so I really enjoyed that, because for me, that kind of brought in both the masculine and the feminine aspects to create a being that is in equilibrium and harmony. And that's where water is always seeking to come back into balance. And that is, I think, the ideal. We can go too far one way, too far the other way. But I think for me personally, just as me as a woman, my journey has been about coming into balance, about not being too extreme, but actually being in full surrender, not surrender because in a subservient way, but surrender to the fact that I am this being of water and salt, minerals, consciousness, and that I can move these parts of me however I want. And so it comes into the movement even of our emotions. We think it's so easy for us to just react when something triggers us or something happens, and we can, or even if we know that sensation, we get a big shock, can feel really prickly and sharp inside of our body. So we have these reactions, but when we responding with our own inner engineering of this fluid body, is quite a different experience. So it's really about getting to know how your body can feel and begin to understand what it is to be you, what it is to be who you are, how you feel, and how balance feels inside of you. Because in this day and age, it's like a lot of people don't know what they can trust, what information they can trust, the government they can trust, this, that, the other. But we can trust water. We can trust water. Water will never see you wrong. and you are, by molecular count, 99% of it. And water came from outer space. At least 70% of the earth is covered in this water that came from meteorites and asteroids. It is the rebel element. It will not conform to the laws of physics and gravity because it expands when it cools and it climbs up trees, and we hardly know anything about it. And it is wild, and it doesn't like to be experimented on because it will, in fact, not even work with me if I go into arrogance. And not that I often do, but sometimes you think you know what's going to happen, and then I'm reminded, oh, actually, no, I need to tone that down. But it's like it is. It's wild, but it's gentle. It's all of the different things. And we are all of those different things. We can experience all that myriad of emotion. That's a wonderful thing about being human, being in this physical body, is that even if we're in a wheelchair, even if we are disabled in certain ways, we have our mind and we are able to have this world we live on, yes, but the world we live in. That world we live in, we have actually, a nice thing I like to remind myself of is my thoughts are the clouds going by, but I'm really the sky. So to remember to watch all the clouds going by, knowing that they will pass, but are not to be attached to my thoughts, but to be reminded that in fact, the I that I am is awareness. So when I think of water, and we are water bodies, I think of myself as awareness, and to be aware doesn't come in judgment. So we're so quick to judge ourselves for having that thought or having this thing or whatever. But actually, to become more of the observer has helped me through many, many tribulations in life. And so I think that's been helpful.
And I think, that's the piece that brings it full circle into, in the likeness of God. That's where we're made. And so if that frequency maybe was the male aspect coming into the female aspect of the water, then as we engage that free will, that is our gift, in choosing to react or respond and be the observer and just notice, the magnificence of us, and understand that at this point, this time in our history of where we're at the antithesis of human history. Every prophecy, every story, every good and bad, Matrix, Lord of the Rings, like, all we're living it. This is the time of that, where we actually get the opportunity to not only have this human sensual sexual experience, but also have the co-creative ability through the water and our intentions and free will to step into the gods that we were designed to be. And this is the two worlds that we toggle right now, and we're all like in this huge transition of just like, what's happening? It's so weird. And like, you're crying, you're laughing, it's like so extreme, and we're trying to acclimate to this upgrade of stepping into our divine birthright to have that authority over our beingness and be able to respond or react, and like realize consciously moving forward, not just with our personal, but like every choice that we make, and how critical it is right now for us to be making those conscious choices. But I know that you're very short on time, so I just wanted to say thank you so much. If you have anything else that you would just like to close us out with, I would be grateful.
Sure. Well, I'm so grateful for you and for all you're doing in the world and all you're bringing in the world. And I think that it's been an honor it has been an honor to have this particular conversation with you. But I think for me, what I hope comes across is the word of conscious. Mm-hmm. So it is that thing where intimacy and consciousness, it's a deliberate decision to step up, level up into who you really want to be, who you are, who you want to become, and I think that's the way that you attract somebody and that will actually mirror you and match you. Water is always in search for itself, and so the eyes are like 99%, the lens is 99% of this highly structured water, and they're saying that that the eyes are the windows to the soul. When you look into the eyes of your beloved, you are also looking into yourself. And to be that reflection that you want to see, I think that that is truly one of the most intimate things. Just looking at yourself through the eyes of someone else and reflecting them back to them in all its sincerity, vulnerability, honesty, transparency is one of the greatest gifts that we have to give as beings of water.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and it all starts within.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining me today and having this conversation. It's one that we can clearly have for a very long time. There's just so much because we are water beings and we are divine, and it's such a beautiful complement to. Yeah, I think we're like tones. We're all in this symphony, and we're all like coming into frequency and resonance with each other in this time, and it's really just a beautiful experience to be human and step into the God beingness that we are. And I'm so thankful to be on this journey and have beautiful friends like you and so many in the world who have awoken to water's message and the waters within them. So I would just like to say, please step into that divine knowing of yourself and ask those questions and enjoy and be pleasurable about your exploration in the gods that you are. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you being with us
Thank you.
today. Thank you
Thank you.
for the opportunity to share in World Unity Week. It's been so many beautiful offerings. And until next time, thank
All
you.
right. Bye.
Bye.